I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to tell a story like this on the internet, but here I am, because betrayal this deep deserves to be heard. And maybe, just maybe, someone else out there will hear this and avoid the trap I fell into. It all started on a random Tuesday afternoon. One of those boring, quiet days when the biggest thing on your mind is what to cook for dinner. I was 34, married for 9 years, living in the suburbs of North Carolina with my husband, Ethan. We had a pretty standard life. Ethan worked in IT remote most days, and I was running a small online boutique for customized home decor. We didn't have kids yet, we were trying, but that's another story. About a year ago, my mom, Darlene, moved in with us. She had a fall, broke her hip, and couldn't live alone in her old house anymore. I didn't hesitate. Of course she could come stay. She was my mom. She raised me alone after my dad died. She was loud, bossy, and extremely flirtatious. Always had been. But she was also my blood, and I owed her everything. Or so I thought. Now, here's where things start to feel like a twisted reality show. For the first few weeks, things were fine. Ethan helped her up the stairs sometimes. She'd thank him with that laugh. That laugh. A flirty giggle I had heard my whole life but never paid much attention to. Until one day I caught it too often. Too rehearsed. First I brushed it off. Then I started seeing it. The subtle touches. The long lingering looks. The way she'd comment on how handsome Ethan was when I was literally sitting right there. But still, I never imagined what I was about to witness. One afternoon I came home early from an appointment. I didn't announce it. I just turned the key, kicked off my shoes and walked in. The house was oddly quiet. No Netflix blaring from the living room, no Ethan on his Zoom calls. Just silence. Something told me to go upstairs. I walked slowly, careful not to make the stairs creak, and as I reached the hallway, I heard it. Soft moan. My stomach dropped, crept closer. The door to our guest room, my mother's room, was slightly ajar. Peeked in. What I saw was like something out of a nightmare. My husband was in bed. With my mother. She was on top of him, laughing like a schoolgirl, like this was some casual, everyday affair. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. And then, I don't know what took over me, I kicked the door open. The look on their faces. Terror. Naked, disgusting, twisted terror. My mom jumped off him, pulling the sheets around herself like modesty had suddenly decided to show up. Ethan scrambled for his boxers. I stood frozen. I can explain, they both said, at the same time. Like a bad soap opera. Like their betrayal was something that could be explained with words. Let me pause here and say this. There's no way to explain sleeping with your daughter's husband. There's no excuse. No context. No slip-up. No we were drunk defense. This was intentional, and I was just starting to uncover how deep it went. Let me take you back about 10 months before that horrible afternoon. After her surgery, my mom insisted she'd only stay a few weeks. She made all the typical promises. I don't want to intrude. I'll stay out of your hair. I'll be gone as soon as I'm better. But the weeks turned into months. She started decorating the guest room with her own curtains. She rearranged the kitchen. She started watching TV late at night in our bedroom while Ethan was still up. She had no boundaries. She also had this habit of walking around in silk robes. Short ones. With nothing underneath. I know that sounds petty, but when you live in a house with your husband, your mother should not be strutting around like a Victoria's Secret model at 11 p.m. When I brought it up to Ethan, he'd laugh. Babe, come on. That's your mom. She's old school. You know she's just dramatic. And when I told her, she'd say, you're just being insecure. Ethan's a man. If he looks, it's because he's alive, not because he wants me. She laughed. Every single. Looking back, that laugh was a red flag I ignored. She wasn't just healing her hip. She was worming her way into every part of my life. Over time, Ethan started siding with her in arguments. If I said the house was messy, he'd say I was nagging. If I got upset that she threw out my skincare products, yes, she literally said I didn't need them anymore, he'd say I was overreacting. And then she started using phrases like, he deserves a woman who appreciates him. Or, if I were 20 years younger, Like jokes. Except they weren't jokes. They were warning signs. I just didn't realize I was being slowly pushed out of my own marriage. The more I complained, the more they made me feel crazy. The more isolated I felt. And the more bonded they became. There was one night, I remember it too clearly, when I came downstairs at 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. I found them on the couch. She was rubbing his shoulders. In the dark, watching some old black and white movie. I froze in the hallway. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked up. He turned and said, "Oh hey babe, couldn't sleep?" Like that was normal. After catching them in bed, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there in stunned silence. Then I turned around, walked out of the room, walked down the stairs and sat on the front porch. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually Ethan came out. His first words. It was a mistake. A mistake that had apparently been going on for 3 months. And possibly longer. My mom didn't come outside. She didn't apologize. She didn't even cry. She stayed upstairs like the coward she was. She moved out 2 days later. Packed like a thief in the night. Left a note on the kitchen counter that read, "You'll thank me one day. You weren't enough for him." Let me repeat that. You weren't enough for him. My own mother wrote that to me. After sleeping with my husband. The betrayal would have been enough. But I started finding things. Screenshots, texts, voicemails, photos. Turns out they'd been flirting for almost a year. Long before she ever needed to move in. They'd even stayed in a hotel together while I was out of town visiting a friend in Colorado. A 2-night getaway that she claimed was a spiritual retreat. The worst part. They called it our little secret garden. That's what they named the album of photos in his hidden iCloud folder. A folder he thought I'd never find. My mom, the woman who gave birth to me, was in lingerie, sitting on hotel beds, biting her lip, writing things like, "Does your wife satisfy you like this?" I threw up in the kitchen sink when I saw it. I didn't tell anyone for 3 days. I stayed inside, barely ate, barely slept. Just stared at the walls while my life slowly crumbled in my hands. Every memory felt tainted. Every smile I'd ever shared with Ethan now felt like a lie. Every childhood hug from my mother made me physically sick. How does someone you grew inside your body grow up and stab you in the back like that? How does a man vow forever and then sleep with your own blood? On the 4th day, I finally called my sister, Emily. She gasped and then she cried. I hadn't even told her what happened. She said, "I knew something was wrong." Then, in a voice that barely held together, she whispered, "Is it Mom?" She knew. She had seen it too. Not the act but the build-up. The glances. Energy. The way Ethan would light up when Darlene walked into a room. She just didn't want to believe it. "I thought I was crazy," she said. We both were. Gaslit into silence by a woman who spent her life playing puppet master. Emily told me something else too. Something that dropped my heart into the floor. "Do you remember Uncle Terry's divorce? The family barely talks about it." I did. It was messy. His wife had allegedly cheated, and he lost custody of their 2 kids. It was always some hush story. No one told the full truth. "Well," Emily said slowly, "Mom slept with her. Uncle Terry's wife. That's why they divorced." I was speechless. It wasn't just Ethan. It wasn't just me. This woman, my mother, had a history of seducing people closest to her daughters. Emily had never said anything before because, in her words, who would believe me? I hung up and stared at my phone for an hour, just letting that rot sink in. This wasn't a one-time slip. This was a pattern. Disease. My mother had slept with her daughter's husband and made it feel like my fault. Later that evening, I confronted Ethan again. This time I was calm. Colder. I wanted to know why. I wanted to hear it from him, without the pathetic excuses. He said, "I don't know. It just happened." I laughed. A dry, humorless laugh that felt more like choking. It just happened. We were talking one night. She was there for me. You were always tired. Always working. She just understood me in ways you didn't. I stood there, arms folded, nodding like I was listening. But inside I was breaking into a million glass pieces. He added, I know it was wrong, but it didn't feel wrong. That line right there. That was when I realized there was no fixing this. No salvaging. No coming back from that level of betrayal. He wasn't sorry. He was only sorry I found out. He tried to hug me at one point. Said he missed me. Said he still loved me. I pushed him off with every ounce of strength I had left in my body. You don't love me. You love yourself. And it was true. Ethan was always the golden boy. Charming, successful, never held accountable. Even now, after cheating on me with my mother, he was playing the victim. I filed for divorce a week later. I left the house. Couldn't stand to sleep in that bed again. I moved in with Emily, who welcomed me like a soldier returning from war. We sat on her porch that first night, sipping tea, silent for a long time. Finally she said, I'm proud of you. You walked away. And I cried again. Ugly, shaking, chest-heaving kind of crying. Because even though I had walked away, I felt empty. Like someone had scooped the insides out of me and left a shell behind. Then came the real hell, explaining to friends, extended family, neighbors. Everyone wanted to know why we were splitting. Most assumed it was infertility or money issues. I let them assume for a while until one friend, our mutual friend, Jenny, asked me point blank. Was he cheating? He nodded. With who? I swallowed. My mom. She covered her mouth and gasped. Oh my God. And just like that, word started spreading. Not from me. I never spoke of it online or publicly, but people talk. Especially when a story sounds like something out of a twisted Lifetime movie. Then came the messages. One woman messaged me anonymously. Her name was Lisa. She had been one of my mom's co-workers back in the early 2000s. She said, I don't want to stir things, but I once caught your mom kissing my fiancé at our office Christmas party. He swore it meant nothing, but he dumped me 6 weeks later and got with her. I read it 10 times. Another message came, this time from a woman named Bonnie. Your mom dated my brother after her second divorce. He killed himself 5 months after they broke up. We always suspected there was more to it, but your mom cut off all contact. Just disappeared. I don't know what shocked me more, the affair or the fact that my mother left behind a trail of destroyed lives and no one ever said a thing. She was magnetic. She knew how to smile, how to make people feel seen. But behind that smile was manipulation, strategy, and lust for control. When I didn't call her after the divorce papers were served, she messaged me. Not a sorry. Not a plea for forgiveness. You should thank me. That man would have left you eventually. That was it. No guilt. No tears. Just the same smug, ice-cold tone she used when she used to say, You'll understand when you're older. Blocked her. I didn't tell her I was moving out of state. Didn't tell her I was starting therapy. Didn't tell her I was finally going to start living for myself, without her in my shadow. Ethan tried to reach out again, this time with flowers and a letter. The letter said he missed us, that he made a terrible mistake, and that he hoped we could someday be friends. I mailed it back to him, ripped into pieces. I didn't need closure from him, or her. I needed peace. That peace didn't come fast. I started getting nightmares. I'd wake up sweating, thinking they were laughing in my bed again. I avoided mirrors because I hated what I saw. Someone who was blind, someone who let it happen under her nose. But slowly, through therapy, through journaling, through endless phone calls with Emily, I started to heal. I started to remember that what happened wasn't about me being not enough. It was about people who had no concept of boundaries or loyalty. I started to see how much I had ignored. How often I made excuses. How often I played the good daughter and understanding wife roles while losing my own voice. And one day I woke up and didn't cry. Didn't flinch at his name. Didn't check my phone for an apology that was never coming. That was the day I knew I was okay. But I wasn't done. Because there's one part of the story I haven't told you yet. Something I discovered after the divorce. Something that changes everything. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Just as I was beginning to rebuild, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Something in me said don't, but curiosity won. Picked up. Hello. A woman's voice. Shaky. Nervous. Hi. Is this Rachel? Pause. Yes. Who's this? My name is Krista. I think we might be related. My stomach dropped. She continued. I don't want to sound crazy, and I know this is going to be a lot, but please just let me say it all before you hang up. And so I listened. I sat on the edge of my bed, heart racing, palms sweaty, as this stranger unraveled the final thread in a nightmare I thought had already ended. Krista told me she had been searching for her biological family for years. She was adopted as a baby, and her adoption records had been sealed in Pennsylvania. Recently, she had gotten access through an ancestry site after doing a DNA test, and my name came up as a half-sibling match. I didn't understand. A half-sibling. She gave me her birth date, 1989. Froze. That was the year my mom mysteriously disappeared for 6 months and then returned suddenly, with a new job, a new car, and a silence about what happened. I remember asking about it as a kid. She always said, Mommy just needed a break. Sometimes women need time away. And then she changed the subject. I asked Krista who her biological mother was. She said, it lists a woman named Darlene. Darlene Mitchell. My mother. I dropped the phone. Literally dropped it onto the floor and stared at it like it had just bitten me. I picked it back up and whispered, You're saying my mom gave you up? Krista said yes. She had grown up in another state, had no idea who her real mother was until she got the DNA results. And now, here she was, calling the woman who unknowingly shared the same twisted bloodline. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was hallucinating. It was too much. We agreed to meet for coffee the next week just to talk. And when I saw her, I knew. She looked like me. Same nose, same cheekbones, same nervous laugh. But where I was hardened by years of betrayal, Krista had a softness to her. A kindness I hadn't felt in a long time. She was warm, calm, curious. She asked questions gently. She didn't push. She just wanted to know who she came from. I told her everything. About Ethan. About our mother. About the betrayal. She held my hand across the table and cried with me. Then she told me something I wasn't prepared to hear. Apparently, our mother had reached out to her 6 months before. Darlene had found Krista through a distant cousin's Facebook account. She didn't tell her who she really was at first, just said she was an old friend of the family and wanted to reconnect. They had exchanged emails, few phone calls. My mom sent her gifts. And then, Krista said, she made me uncomfortable. I asked what she meant. She asked if I ever felt attracted to older people. She said sometimes daughters have confusing feelings toward women they admire. I felt bile rise in my throat. She said strange things, like how love doesn't have to be defined by roles. That families are just constructs. I couldn't breathe. My mother wasn't just toxic. She was dangerous. And she was trying to manipulate a daughter she gave away. That's when I knew she wasn't done. She hadn't just betrayed me once. She was still out there spinning webs, looking for new people to feed her ego, to exploit, to destroy. I told Krista to block her immediately. She already had. I called my sister that night and told her everything. She wasn't surprised. Just quiet. Then she said, she's sick, Rachel. We have to let her go. So we did. We cut her off. Blocked every number, email, everything. We agreed that if she ever showed up again, we'd involve police. I moved across the country after that. Needed a fresh start. Got a tiny place near the ocean. Just me and my thoughts. I started painting again. Something I hadn't done since college. I'd forgotten how good it felt to lose yourself in color, to create something beautiful after everything ugly had been ripped away. One night I painted a cracked vase. Half filled with flowers, half covered in thorns. I called it inheritance. Because that's what trauma is, isn't it? Kind of inheritance. You didn't ask for it. You didn't deserve it. But it's yours now. You carry it until you learn how to turn it into something else. People always say you can't choose your family. But you can choose who gets to stay. And I chose myself. I don't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I survived her. And if you're listening to this, if you're sitting there wondering if you're crazy for noticing red flags in your own family, or if you're stuck in a situation where love feels twisted, let me say this. You're not crazy. You're just seeing clearly. Don't ignore the gut feeling. Don't explain away the strange behavior. You are allowed to walk away, even if the person hurting you gave you life. Blood is not a hall pass for betrayal. And sometimes, cutting off your family is the first real act of self-love. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've made it this far, you're stronger than you think. And to my mother, wherever you are, if you ever hear this, I'm done hiding. You don't own my silence anymore.